Let's talk about Mitch McConnell, friend or foe. You know, there comes a time when certain leaders outlive their usefulness, particularly in the political realm. Typically, they are in denial about it and become more of a detriment than a benefit. And with a certain resigned sadness, this is the case of Mitch McConnell. No one is beyond criticism, and over the years, Mitch has had very little criticism from me. But I must say the heartburn is growing for me and other Kentuckians. The numerous messages I have received about McConnell's voting no on Trump's pick for defense secretary have ranged from profound disappointment to outright outrage. So that there is no mistake as to where I stand, when Mitch has faced opposition in the past, whether Democrat or Republican, I have been in his corner and will be even in the future until he steps down. But before I get too much into the details, let me tell you a little bit about my 3 decades relationship with Mitch. Starting in 1999, and really before, when I became chairman of the Louisville Jefferson County Republican Party here in Kentucky, I worked with Mitch and his staff very closely. Over that period of time, I carried a lot of water for Mitch. I gave Mitch a wide berth, as I know what it takes and what it's like to try to herd cats. And in his case, that would be his having to deal with all the prima donnas within the United States Senate. For that reason, I cut him a lot of slack and encouraged others to do so. I know what it's like, as I chaired a committee of 45 who all had opinions. As Mitch's tenure continued and he became Senate leader, we were all very proud and ecstatic that the leader of the Senate was our own Kentucky senator. Then about 8 years ago, when he helped engineer the conversion, basically, of the U.S. Supreme Court, that was a great moment, and he deserves a lot of credit. But that would not have happened without a Republican president, and that was Donald Trump. Even then, Mitch was not a supporter until Trump became the Republican nominee, and only begrudgingly so. However, one good deed does not entitle you to a permanent get-out-of-jail-free card, nor to be as reckless as you want to be forevermore. Much like Biden, we have seen McConnell decline over the years and seen his reliability as a conservative more and more in question. There comes a time when making excuses crosses the line into lacking candor, to put it politely. I know that those in leadership sometimes have inside information that others don't, and you have to make unpopular decisions and suffer the slings and arrows even though your decision is correct. But not in the case of McConnell's vote against Pete Hegseth. From every angle, I have analyzed this, pairing up with the likes of Murkowski of Alaska and Susan Collins of Maine, to see if there is any hidden message or purpose, and I have found none, except only if his no vote was a concession to keep Murkowski and Collins within the party. In that instance, all would be forgiven. Nevertheless, I would remind everyone, particularly my Kentucky brethren, that Mitch does not have a sterling history, particularly regarding protecting or advancing the Republican cause when it comes to backing the most conservative and reliable candidates. I would remind my listeners that Mitch McConnell has frequently supported the establishment or rhino-type candidates over more conservative candidates. I specifically recall his backing of Pennsylvania Senator Arlen Specter, who later stabbed Mitch and the Republican Party in the back. After Specter won re-election, he flipped to Democrat. Likewise, Mitch repeated the same mistake with Senator Charlie Crist of Florida over a more conservative candidate, and Charlie Crist, like Specter, changed parties to Democrat, again stabbing Mitch and the Republican Party in the back. Now we come to the Rand Paul campaign, of which I know quite a bit about. When Rand Paul decided to run for Senate, he was running against Kentucky's Republican Secretary of State, Trey Grayson, whom I had worked with but as chairman of the party here in Louisville, but I knew him to be a rhino, that is, Republican in name only. He, too, was of the Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski type. I questioned McConnell's people about their backing of Grayson. The excuse I got was that, well, Mitch would be there to control him, to which my response was that Mitch was not always going to be around. Given some of Mitch's other poor choices of candidates that he backed, I was not going to trust that. I was right. In good conscience, I could not support Grayson. In so many instances, Republicans are so naive and inept that Democrats couldn't have better opposition. So I met with Rand Paul to discuss his positions on various issues, and after our meeting, I committed to my support to him. I was right again. We resoundingly beat Mitch's pick, and Rand went on to win the Senate seat. During the primary campaign, I made a big deal out of Mitch's previous poor picks, which was reported in the newspapers. Before primary election day, one of Mitch's people told me that they would define Rand early on and that he would not win. Well, we know how that turned out. I rarely have ever challenged Mitch and have even been a supporter, I'd say 90% of the time. Now, that's being a pretty good friend. Most marriages don't have that much agreement. After Rand won, I got a call the next day from Mitch's director inviting me and my executive director to lunch. When we sat down for lunch, we were asked, "Are you all still mad at us?" And I quickly responded, "Why would I be mad at you? We just beat your ass by 23 points. Yeah, I guess I was a bit blunt and a bit perturbed because I was having to fight for principles of freedom and what was right within my own party. Mitch was wrong again. Rand, like Trump, is strong rope. He is Kentucky's Trump in the Senate. He has represented Kentucky and its conservative values exceedingly well. And I know him well, and he himself is presidential material. He does Kentucky proud." Now back to Mitch and his current status. He has worn out his welcome with many Kentucky Republicans. His poor strategic decisions are accumulating and becoming more and more problematic for the Kentucky Republican Party as a whole. Now, I know there are some who worship Mitch and would row the boat over the waterfalls for him, but I'm no stranger when it comes to chastising and calling a foul against Republicans when it is appropriate. I'm a servant of the people, and the people come first. So I don't make my remarks about Mitch lightly and only after a lot of counsel. And as I said, I would still favor him over any Democrat. I've bitten my tongue for the last time. After Mitch's no vote against Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense, I had to give comment. Most Kentucky Republicans disagree with him on this issue, except those who would rather go along just to get along. This is more of a slap against President Trump than Pete Hegseth. And let me remind the never-Trumpers that only Trump could have beaten Hillary Clinton, and he did. Trump gave us 3 great Supreme Court justices, and the never-Trumpers were unrepentantly wrong back in 2016 and were again in 2024. They need to get out of the way. Trump is showing us the way, and I am gratified that Hegseth won confirmation even by the narrowest of margins because of the tie-breaking vote that the vice president, despite Mitch's no vote. But to further exemplify the foolishness of Mitch's vote, he knew that even with his vote, he would not defeat the nomination. That was an extravagant waste of political capital and a slap in the face of Kentucky Republicans who are solidly Trump supporters. The only thing Mitch was going to accomplish by voting no is to further alienate President Trump, to whom every Republican owes a debt of gratitude because no one in living memory has ever suffered the persecution or endured what he has to save the country. Mitch's opposition is inexcusable. It benefited him nothing and has raised the ire of Kentucky Republicans and no doubt the president who Kentuckians love. It certainly doesn't put Kentucky in a good light. As far as I'm concerned, Rand Paul is Kentucky's senatorial leader, along with the likes of Representative James Comer in the House. They are the true conservative heroes. President Trump won Kentucky by 30 points. Think about that. Kentuckians deserve better than what we have seen out of McConnell's offices over the last few years. I have been warning my fellow Republicans for the last 4 years that we needed new leadership and that preparations were necessary upon Mitch's inevitable departure. Let's not make the same mistake the Democrats made by hanging on to Joe Biden. Furthermore, given Mitch's growing unreliability, the Republican Party of Kentucky's brand and image can be tarnished by an increasingly unpredictable and out-of-step McConnell as he makes such foolish decisions as he did with the Hegseth vote. It was unnecessary. It gained him nothing, and certainly didn't help the party. I know his stated reasons, but then again, I've heard them before, and I know of his strategic mistakes of the past. He is not perfect. None of us are. But this was not rocket science. It was a gross, unforced error. I make no apologies for this public chastisement of Mitch because I have been a faithful and loyal servant to him and the Republican Party in Kentucky for 30 years. So my disappointment and message are not directed to Mitch since the deed is already done, but to the Republican Party of Kentucky. You need to wake up to the reality that McConnell, while he has served us well in the past, is becoming a liability, and the well-being of the party is more important than a single man. He has now exhausted all the kudos he got from the strategies he employed with the Supreme Court, and he has clearly gone rogue and against the will of his constituents. He is not on board with the Trump agenda. If it is personal, he needs to get over it. Trump has earned and deserves better, as evidenced by his first week in office. Mitch, remember who the real enemy is. It is not Trump. Please end your career on a good note. Don't allow or follow Biden's mistake.